During my daughter's wedding toast, her groom called me a worthless liar in front of 180 guests. I stood, walked to the microphone, and said 3 words: "Play the video." The room went silent as footage of him and his boss, Victoria Reynolds, appeared on the massive screen behind the wedding cake. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. But let me tell you how I got to that moment, because this story actually started 10 months earlier when I discovered what my daughter's fiancé really was, and my own daughter chose him over me. My name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 67 years old, and I raised Sarah as a single mother after her father died when she was 12. For 23 years, it was just us against the world. I worked 2 jobs to put her through nursing school, never missed a single graduation or birthday, and thought we had an unbreakable bond. I was wrong. 10 months before the wedding, I was having lunch with my neighbor Janet when she casually mentioned seeing Sarah's fiancé Ryan Bennett at Romano's restaurant with another woman. "They weren't just having dinner, Margaret," Janet said carefully. "They were all over each other, kissing, holding hands. The woman was wearing a wedding ring, and she definitely wasn't Sarah." My blood ran cold, but I knew I had to verify before saying anything. The next day, I drove to Ryan's office building and waited in the parking garage. At 1:15 p.m., Ryan emerged with a stunning brunette who practically threw herself at him. They kissed passionately before she got into a BMW with family stickers on the back window. I took photos, my hands shaking with rage. This man was about to marry my daughter, and he was cheating on her with a married woman. That evening, I sat Sarah down in my living room and showed her the photos. "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something about Ryan. I saw him today with another woman and—" "Stop." Sarah's voice was ice cold. "Just stop right there." I handed her my phone with the photos. She glanced at them for exactly 3 seconds before handing it back. "That's Victoria Reynolds, his boss. They have client meetings all the time." "Sarah, they were kissing, passionately, in a parking garage." "Were they?" Sarah's tone turned nasty. "Or did you see what you wanted to see because you've never approved of any man I've dated?" "Sarah, that's not fair. I'm trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "From what? From finally being happy? From having a successful fiancé who actually loves me? A successful fiancé who's cheating on you?" Sarah stood up abruptly. "You know what, Mom? I'm done. I'm done with your jealousy, your constant criticism, your need to control every aspect of my life. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to save you from making a terrible mistake. The only mistake I made was thinking you could be happy for me." Sarah grabbed her purse. "Ryan warned me this would happen. He said you'd try to sabotage our relationship because you can't stand the thought of me having someone else in my life." Ryan had warned her? That meant he'd been manipulating Sarah against me from the beginning. "Sarah, please, just listen." "No, you listen." Sarah's voice was cruel in a way I'd never heard before. "I'm 29 years old. I don't need my bitter, lonely mother trying to destroy my happiness because she's jealous that I found love and she's stuck living alone with her cats." The words hit like physical blows. Bitter, lonely, stuck, living alone. I've worked my whole life to support you, to give you every opportunity, and now I'm supposed to sacrifice my happiness to keep you company? Is that it? Sarah was at the door now. "Ryan is twice the person you'll ever be. He's successful, he's kind, he treats me like a queen. And most importantly, he wants me to be independent, not tied to my mother's apron strings forever." After she left, I sat in my empty living room and cried for 2 hours. But then something else took over. Something cold and calculating. If Sarah wanted to choose a cheating fiancé over her own mother, fine. But she was going to learn exactly who Ryan Bennett really was, and she was going to learn it in the most humiliating way possible. 3 days later, Ryan called me himself. "Margaret, Sarah told me about your little accusation," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I want you to know I don't hold it against you. I understand that this transition is hard for mothers." "Transition?" "Sarah becoming an independent woman instead of your emotional support system. But I'm taking good care of her now. She doesn't need you interfering in her life anymore." The smugness in his voice made my skin crawl. "Ryan, I saw you with Victoria Reynolds. You saw me with my boss discussing a client proposal. But I understand how someone with your limited perspective might misinterpret professional interactions. Someone with my limited perspective. This barely employed marketing assistant was talking down to me like I was a senile old woman. Sarah's made it clear she doesn't want you poisoning her mind against me, Ryan continued. So I suggest you back off before you lose your daughter permanently. After Ryan's threatening phone call, I knew I needed irrefutable evidence. But what happened next made me realize just how completely my daughter had been turned against me. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Sarah called asking for money. Not an apologetic call to reconcile, just a demand for cash. I need $5,000 for wedding expenses, she said, without even saying hello. Sarah, we haven't spoken since you tried to sabotage my relationship with lies? Yeah, I remember. Her voice was sharp. Ryan says I should give you a chance to show you support our marriage, despite your behavior, Ryan says. Everything was, Ryan says, now. If you want to discuss money, maybe we should talk about what I saw. What you thought you saw, Sarah interrupted. Ryan explained everything. Victoria Reynolds is married to his college friend David. They're close family friends. The kiss you saw was a friendly greeting, but your dirty mind twisted it into something inappropriate. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. Ryan had prepared for this. Sarah, I know what I saw. You know what you wanted to see. Ryan says older women often become paranoid and suspicious when they feel threatened by younger relationships. Older women. Paranoid. Suspicious. These weren't Sarah's words. This was Ryan's poison dripping from my daughter's mouth. I'll transfer the money, I said quietly, but I want to meet with both of you to discuss the wedding plans. Actually, we don't need your input on the wedding, Sarah replied coldly. Just your checkbook. Just your checkbook. My own daughter had just reduced me to a source of funding, but I transferred the money anyway because I was already forming a plan. Over the next 8 months, the pattern became clear. Sarah would call every few weeks demanding money, always for Ryan's ideas, always delivered like I owed them something. The down payment for their house, $15,000, Ryan's credit card debt that was affecting their mortgage application, $8,000, the engagement party that I wasn't invited to plan, $4,000. Each time I sent money, I got colder treatment. Sarah stopped visiting entirely. She stopped calling just to chat. Our relationship became purely transactional. She wanted money, I provided it, she disappeared. Meanwhile, I hired Marcus Webb's investigation firm to document everything. What they found made my earlier suspicions look like child's play. Margaret Jennifer Walsh, my lead investigator, said during our 4th meeting. Ryan Bennett and Victoria Reynolds aren't just having an affair. They're running a sophisticated con game. She spread photos across my kitchen table. Ryan and Victoria at expensive restaurants, romantic getaways, jewelry stores, all paid for with money I'd given Sarah. Look at this. Jennifer pointed to credit card statements. Every major wedding expense Ryan claimed to need money for was actually used to finance his affair. The engagement party money, paid for a weekend in Napa with Victoria, the house down payment, used for a Bermuda vacation while he told Sarah he was at a work conference. But the house, they got a different loan through Victoria's connections. Your money never went toward the house. It went toward maintaining Ryan's double life. The evidence was overwhelming. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, jewelry store purchases. Ryan had taken nearly $40,000 of my money and used it to wine and dine his married mistress while my daughter planned their wedding. But the worst was yet to come. Jennifer showed me social media posts that made my blood boil. Victoria Reynolds has been posting about her mystery boyfriend for months, Jennifer said, pulling up Instagram photos. Look at this bracelet she's wearing in this post from 3 months ago. Now look at this receipt from the jewelry store. The receipt was dated the same day I'd wired Sarah money for emergency car repairs. Ryan had taken my money and bought his mistress a $1,200 bracelet. There's more, Jennifer continued. We've documented them mocking your daughter openly. Victoria posted this photo at a restaurant with the caption, "Dinner with my favorite charity case's sugar daddy." Charity case's sugar daddy. They were laughing at Sarah behind her back while spending my money. Margaret, there's something else you need to know. Victoria Reynolds isn't happily married. She and her husband David are separated. She's been using Ryan to make David jealous, while Ryan uses her to advance his career. So everyone is using everyone else, except Sarah, who's being used by everyone. Exactly. And it gets worse. We have evidence that Ryan has been sabotaging Sarah's other relationships for years. Her best friend Monica? Ryan convinced Sarah that Monica was jealous of their relationship. Sarah's cousin Lisa? Ryan told Sarah that Lisa tried to flirt with him at the family barbecue. I thought about how isolated Sarah had become over the past 2 years. Friends who used to call regularly had gradually disappeared from her life. Ryan has systematically cut Sarah off from her support system, Jennifer continued. Classic abuser behavior. The only people left in her life are you, her source of money, and him. What about her job, her co-workers? That's another problem. Ryan has been pressuring Sarah to quit nursing and work for his marketing company instead. He says he wants to take care of her, but really, he wants complete financial control. The picture was becoming horrifyingly clear. Ryan wasn't just cheating on Sarah, he was isolating, manipulating, and financially abusing her. And she was so completely under his spell that she'd chosen him over her own mother. That evening, I called Sarah one more time. I need to tell you something important about Ryan, I began carefully. God, here we go again, Sarah sighed dramatically. Ryan said you'd probably try this again closer to the wedding. He says it's typical behavior for controlling mothers. Sarah, I have proof. Proof of what? That you're so pathetically lonely that you'll make up lies about my fiancé? Sarah's voice was vicious. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a mother who's so jealous of her daughter's happiness that she invents conspiracy theories? I have photographs, financial records, documented evidence. I don't care if you have a signed confession from God himself, Sarah snarled. Ryan is the best thing that ever happened to me, and if you can't accept that, then maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding at all. The threat hung in the air between us. Are you uninviting me from your wedding? I'm giving you a choice. Drop this obsession with Ryan, apologize for your behavior, and act like a normal mother. Or stay home and live with the fact that you chose paranoid delusions over your daughter's happiness. I made my choice that night. If Sarah wanted to learn the truth about Ryan the hard way, I'd make sure she learned it in front of everyone who mattered to both of them. The next 6 months were a masterclass in humiliation. Sarah and Ryan seemed determined to punish me for my accusations, while still demanding my money. They created a wedding dynamic where I was simultaneously essential as the primary financier and excluded as the unwelcome mother. Ryan, in particular, took every opportunity to remind me of my place in their new hierarchy. At the engagement party I'd paid for but wasn't allowed to plan, Ryan gave a toast that made my skin crawl. I want to thank everyone who supported Sarah and me, he said, raising his champagne glass, especially those who've shown their support in concrete ways, even when they had concerns about our relationship. The emphasis on concerns was clearly directed at me. Several people glanced in my direction as uncomfortable laughter rippled through the crowd. It takes real maturity, Ryan continued, to put aside personal feelings and support your daughter's choices, even when those choices challenge your need for control. He was publicly humiliating me while thanking me for paying for the party. The audacity was breathtaking. Sarah beamed at him adoringly, completely missing the cruelty of what he'd just done. Later that evening, as I helped clean up the venue I'd paid for, Ryan cornered me in the kitchen. I want to thank you personally, Margaret, he said with that practiced smile. Writing all these checks must be hard when you disapprove so strongly of the recipient. I support my daughter's happiness, I replied carefully. Do you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're trying to buy your way back into her good graces after behaving so poorly. The manipulation was expertly done. He was reframing my financial support as guilt payments rather than generosity. Sarah knows I love her. Sarah knows you tried to destroy her relationship with lies, Ryan corrected smoothly. But she's graciously decided to give you a chance to make amends. Don't waste it. 2 months later, at the bridal shower that cost me $3,000, Ryan's mother, Patricia, made sure I understood my place in the family hierarchy. Margaret, you must be so proud of Sarah for growing into such an independent woman, Patricia said loud enough for half the room to hear. Ryan has been so good for her self-confidence. She's finally learning to trust her own judgment instead of relying on others to make decisions for her. The implication was crystal clear. Sarah's independence from me was a good thing, and Ryan deserved credit for it. Of course, it can't be easy watching your daughter outgrow the need for maternal guidance, Patricia continued with fake sympathy. But you should be proud that you raised a daughter strong enough to choose her own path, even when that path leads away from family drama. Family drama. They'd turned my concerns about Ryan's faithfulness into family drama that Sarah had heroically overcome. But the worst humiliation came 3 weeks before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner. A dinner I'd paid for but had no say in planning. Ryan stood to give another one of his polished speeches, and I knew from his expression that I was about to be publicly dressed down again. Tomorrow, Sarah and I start our life together as a family, he began. But tonight, I want to acknowledge all the people who helped us get here, especially those who learned to put Sarah's happiness above their own comfort zones. Again, the pointed look in my direction. It's not easy for some people to watch the ones they love make independent choices, Ryan continued. There's a natural instinct to try to control situations, to manufacture problems when none exist, to create drama as a way of staying relevant. The room was dead quiet. Everyone understood exactly who he was talking about. But Sarah and I have learned that the strongest relationships are built on trust, not suspicion, on supporting each other's dreams, not tearing them down with paranoid accusations. Paranoid accusations. He was describing my evidence of his affair as paranoia. So, Margaret, Ryan said, looking directly at me now, I want to publicly thank you for learning to keep your concerns to yourself and allowing Sarah to follow her heart. It shows real growth. The applause was scattered and uncomfortable. I'd just been thanked for staying quiet about my son-in-law's infidelity and told it showed real growth. Sarah stood and hugged Ryan, tears in her eyes. That was beautiful, baby. You're so good at forgiveness. Forgiveness. As if I'd been the one who needed forgiving. After dinner, as guests filed out, I found myself alone with Ryan near the bar. Enjoying yourself, Margaret? He asked pleasantly. You're very good at this, I said quietly. Good at what? Making me look like the villain while you play the magnanimous hero. Ryan's smile widened. I have no idea what you mean. I'm just grateful that you've stopped trying to sabotage our relationship. For now. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Let me be very clear about something. Margaret, Sarah is my wife now in every way that matters. Her loyalty is to me, not to you. If you try to cause problems after we're married, you'll find yourself completely cut off from both of us. And if you continue cheating on her, then I guess we'll see who she believes, Ryan replied smoothly. Her loving husband, or her bitter, jealous mother who's already tried to break us up once with lies. He walked away, leaving me standing alone at the bar I'd paid for, at the rehearsal dinner I'd funded, surrounded by people who just watched my son-in-law publicly humiliate me for trying to protect my daughter. But Ryan had no idea what was coming for him tomorrow. The USB drive in my purse contained 8 months of evidence that would destroy his carefully constructed facade. And this time, there would be no room for manipulation or gaslighting. Tomorrow, everyone would see exactly who Ryan Bennett really was. The morning of the wedding brought one final insult that made my resolve unshakable. Sarah called me at 7 a.m. while I was getting ready. Mom, we need to talk about your behavior today, she said without preamble. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. I'm serious. Ryan and I discussed it, and we're concerned about you making a scene. What kind of scene? The kind where you bring up your ridiculous conspiracy theories about Ryan cheating. The kind where you embarrass our family in front of 180 guests. Our family. I was no longer part of our family. Sarah, I haven't mentioned Ryan's affair in months. Because there is no affair. Sarah's voice rose sharply. And if you so much as hint at that nonsense today, if you say one word that spoils my wedding, I will never speak to you again. The threat was delivered with cold finality. Do you understand me, Mother? Not one word, not one look, not one passive-aggressive comment. You will smile, you will be supportive, and you will keep your mouth shut. And if I don't, then you can find yourself a new daughter. Because I'll be done with you forever. She hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, Ryan called with his own set of instructions. Margaret, Sarah's pretty upset about your potential for drama today, he said with fake concern. I convinced her to give you one more chance, but I need your word that you'll behave appropriately. Appropriately according to whom? According to the bride and groom whose wedding you're attending. The bride and groom who've been generous enough to include you despite your previous behavior. Generous enough to include me. At the wedding I was paying for. What exactly do you need my word about, Ryan? That you'll be gracious and supportive today. That you'll celebrate our marriage instead of trying to sabotage it. That you'll act like a mother who loves her daughter instead of a bitter woman who can't let go of her control issues. The psychological manipulation was masterful. Everything was framed as my failing, my problem, my need to change. And if I give you my word, then we can all move forward as a family. Sarah really wants you in her life, Margaret, but not if you're going to be a source of negativity and drama. I understand perfectly, I said. Good. See you at the ceremony. After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen and smiled for the first time in months. They wanted to ensure I wouldn't cause drama at their wedding. They were so confident in their ability to control and manipulate me that they demanded guarantees of my silence. They had no idea they'd just given me permission to do exactly what I'd been planning all along. The wedding ceremony was held in the country club's rose garden, and I have to admit, Sarah looked absolutely radiant. Whatever else Ryan was, he'd made her feel beautiful and loved. That would make what was coming even more devastating. I sat in the third row, exactly where the seating chart had placed me. Not in the front row where mothers typically sit, but close enough to watch Sarah's face when she realized what kind of man she'd married. The ceremony was traditional and beautiful. Ryan's vows were particularly eloquent, promising to love, honor, and cherish Sarah above all others, and to forsake all others for her alone. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Ryan was promising fidelity to Sarah while carrying on an affair with Victoria Reynolds, using money meant for their future together to fund his deception. During the reception cocktail hour, I mingled politely with guests, many of whom I'd known for years. Several people commented on how beautiful the wedding was, how perfect Sarah and Ryan seemed together, how lucky Sarah was to have found such a successful, devoted fiancé. If only they knew. I noticed Victoria Reynolds wasn't at the wedding. According to the guest list Sarah had shared, Victoria had canceled last minute due to a family emergency. More likely, she and Ryan had decided it would be too risky for his mistress to attend his wedding. During dinner, Ryan made more subtle digs at me, disguised as gracious acknowledgments. I want to thank Margaret Thompson for her incredible financial support, he said during his pre-toast remarks. Sarah's mother has been so generous with her contributions to our wedding and our future together. Even when she had concerns about our relationship, she still opened her checkbook to support her daughter's happiness. He made it sound like I'd grudgingly funded their wedding, despite my unreasonable objections to their love story. Margaret has taught me a lot about unconditional love, Ryan continued. About how sometimes we have to support the people we care about, even when we don't understand their choices. The audience nodded approvingly at this touching tribute to maternal love overcoming personal reservations. In fact, Margaret's initial skepticism about our relationship actually made us stronger as a couple. It taught us to communicate better, to trust each other more deeply, to defend our love against outside interference. Outside interference. My attempt to warn Sarah about his infidelity had been reframed as interference that strengthened their bond. So, thank you, Margaret, for ultimately choosing to support us despite your early concerns. It shows real character to admit when you're wrong and put your daughter's happiness first. The applause was warm and appreciative. Ryan had just publicly credited me with recognizing my error and gracefully accepting defeat. Now, it was time for the toast that would change everything. Ryan stood up with his champagne glass, and the room fell silent with anticipation. My friends and family, he began, today I married the most incredible woman in the world. The crowd smiled and murmured agreement. Sarah is patient, forgiving, trusting, and loyal. Sometimes I think she's too trusting for her own good. A few people chuckled at this charming acknowledgement of his bride's generous nature. Sarah has stood by me through everything. She's defended our relationship against people who didn't understand it. She's chosen to trust me even when others tried to plant seeds of doubt. His eyes found mine across the room. My beautiful wife has shown me what real loyalty looks like. She's proven that some people will always choose love over suspicion, trust over paranoia, hope over fear. The audience was completely engaged, hanging on every romantic word. In fact, Sarah's faith in me has been so complete that I could probably get away with anything. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the crowd at this odd turn of phrase. Lucky for her, she married a man of integrity, a man who would never betray her trust or take advantage of her generous spirit. Ryan raised his glass higher. But let's be honest, we all know women like Margaret Thompson, who see deception everywhere they look. Women who can't accept their daughter's happiness and will invent any story, spread any lie, shed any crocodile tear to maintain control. The room went very quiet. This was no longer a romantic toast. Fortunately, Sarah is too smart to fall for emotional manipulation, too strong to be controlled by someone else's paranoid delusions, too loving to believe that the people closest to her are capable of such elaborate deceptions. He was looking directly at me now. So here's to my wife, who knows the difference between a loving mother's concern and a bitter woman's jealousy. Here's to Sarah, who chose truth over lies, love over manipulation. He paused for dramatic effect. And here's to all the worthless liars in this room who tried to come between us with their fake tears and pathetic attempts at control. You failed. The silence was deafening. Everyone understood exactly who Ryan was talking about. That's when I stood up. The walk to the microphone felt like it took forever, but in reality it was probably less than 10 seconds. Every eye in the room followed me as I crossed to the small stage where the DJ had set up his equipment. Ryan's confident smile faltered as I approached. He'd expected me to sit there and take his public humiliation, just like I'd done for the past 8 months. "Thank you, Ryan," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. That was very illuminating. I could see Sarah's face from the stage, confusion and growing alarm written across her features. She was probably terrified that I was about to have some kind of emotional breakdown that would ruin her perfect wedding. "I'd like to share something with everyone," I continued, pulling the USB drive from my purse. "Something that I think will put Ryan's beautiful words into proper context." "Margaret." "Don't," Sarah called out, half rising from her chair. "Please." The desperation in her voice almost made me hesitate. Almost. "For the past 8 months," I said, "I've been called paranoid, controlling, bitter, and jealous. I've been accused of trying to sabotage true love with lies and manipulation." I handed the USB drive to the DJ, who looked uncertain about what to do with it. "Play the video," I said clearly. The DJ glanced at Sarah and Ryan, clearly looking for guidance about whether to follow my instructions. "Play it," I repeated, louder this time. The massive screen behind the wedding cake flickered to life, and Victoria Reynolds's face appeared in high definition. The audio was crystal clear as her voice carried across the stunned reception. "After the wedding, we'll need to be more careful. But honestly, I think Ryan's little wife is perfect for us. She's so naive, she'll never suspect anything." The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Sarah's face went completely white as she stared at the screen. Ryan appeared in the frame, his hands clearly visible as he embraced Victoria in what was obviously her office. "Plus, she works those long nursing shifts," Ryan's voice echoed through the speakers. "Plenty of time for us to be together without any inconvenient questions." I watched Sarah's expression transform from confusion to horror to devastating understanding as the video continued. "And Margaret keeps writing those checks," Victoria continued with a laugh. "It's like having our own personal ATM. Sarah asks for wedding money, Ryan takes it from her account, and we get to spend it on ourselves." On screen, Ryan kissed Victoria passionately before pulling out his phone. "Speaking of spending Margaret's money," he said with a grin, "wait until you see what I'm giving Sarah at the wedding tomorrow." The camera zoomed in on Ryan's phone screen, showing a jewelry website order confirmation for a diamond pendant necklace. "You're giving her the same necklace you gave me?" Victoria laughed delightedly. "Bought with her mother's money?" "No less. Sarah will think it's the most romantic gesture ever. She has no idea her special wedding gift is identical to yours." The crowd was completely silent now, transfixed by the horror unfolding on screen. "The best part," Ryan continued, "is that after tomorrow, Sarah will be legally bound to me. If Margaret ever tries to interfere again, I can cut her off completely, and Sarah will have to choose between her husband and her psychotic mother." "And we both know who she'll choose," Victoria replied. "Exactly. Sarah's already proven she'll choose me over Margaret every time. The woman could catch us in bed together, and Sarah would find a way to blame her mother for misunderstanding the situation. They both laughed, as if this was the funniest joke in the world. I looked at Sarah, who was sitting frozen in her wedding dress, staring at the screen where her new husband was casually discussing his plans to isolate her from her family while continuing his affair with another woman. The necklace Ryan had given her during his toast, the one that supposedly represented his deep love and commitment, lay on the table where she'd dropped it, now revealed as nothing more than a duplicate of a gift he'd already given his mistress. Ryan lunged toward the DJ equipment, but Sarah's stepfather and 2 groomsmen blocked his path. "Let it play," Sarah said quietly, her voice somehow carrying across the entire room despite barely being above a whisper. The video continued for another 2 minutes, with Ryan and Victoria discussing their future plans in explicit detail. They talked about continuing their affair after the wedding, about how easy it would be to manipulate Sarah's work schedule, about the various ways they could continue accessing Margaret's money through their unsuspecting puppet. When it finally ended, the silence was absolute. I stepped back to the microphone. "I discovered Ryan's affair 10 months ago and tried to tell Sarah immediately," I said, into the deathly quiet room. "She called me a bitter, jealous liar and chose to believe him instead. For 8 months, I've been humiliated, insulted and dismissed while Ryan and Victoria spent $43,000 of my money on their relationship." I looked directly at Sarah, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Every dinner, every vacation, every piece of jewelry Ryan gave Victoria was paid for with money I gave you for wedding expenses. The engagement party I wasn't allowed to plan, the rehearsal dinner where Ryan publicly mocked me, this entire wedding, all of it funded by a woman you called paranoid and controlling. Sarah stood up slowly, her wedding dress rustling in the complete silence. "How long have you had that video?" she asked. 3 months. 3 months. She repeated it like she was testing the weight of the words. "You've had proof of Ryan's affair and his theft for 3 months, and you waited until my wedding day to show it?" The accusation in her voice was unmistakable. Even now, even after seeing irrefutable evidence of Ryan's betrayal and cruelty, Sarah was angry at me for the timing of the revelation. "I tried to tell you 10 months ago," I replied. "You chose not to believe me. So you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone I know?" Sarah looked around the ballroom at the 180 guests who had just witnessed her husband's betrayal and her mother's vindication. "You could have shown me this privately. You could have saved me from this public humiliation. But instead, you chose revenge." The word hung in the air between us. "Yes," I said simply. "I chose revenge." The honesty of my answer seemed to shock Sarah more than the video had. She stared at me for a long moment while the entire reception waited to see what would happen next. "You chose revenge over protecting me," she said, her voice growing stronger. "You chose your own satisfaction over your daughter's dignity." "I chose to make sure everyone witnessed the truth," I replied calmly. "Because if I'd shown you privately, Ryan would have convinced you it was fake or taken out of context, or somehow my fault. You don't know that, don't I?" I gestured toward Ryan, who was standing near the head table looking like a trapped animal. "Ryan, would you like to tell Sarah how you would have handled this if I'd approached her privately?" Ryan's face was flushed with rage and humiliation, but he was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. "Let me guess," I continued. "You would have told her the video was doctored, that Victoria and I conspired to destroy your relationship, that this was all an elaborate setup by her controlling mother who couldn't bear to see her daughter happy." I could see from Ryan's expression that I'd hit the mark exactly. "And Sarah, because you love him and because you've spent 10 months believing I'm a jealous, bitter woman, you would have chosen to believe him over the evidence of your own eyes." Sarah opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. We both knew I was right. "So yes," I said, "I chose to present the evidence publicly, where Ryan couldn't manipulate the narrative and you couldn't rationalize it away. I chose to make sure that everyone who witnessed his treatment of me over the past 8 months also witnessed the truth about who he really is." I looked around the room at the stunned faces of family and friends who had watched Ryan mock and humiliate me at every wedding-related event. "For 8 months, you've all watched Ryan paint me as a controlling, paranoid mother who couldn't accept her daughter's happiness. You've watched him publicly thank me for my generosity, while privately calling me a bitter old woman. You've watched Sarah choose him over me, again and again, because you all believed his version of the story. The guests were looking uncomfortable now, probably remembering their own reactions to the various public humiliations I'd endured. Well, now you know the truth. Every check I wrote, every insult I endured, every time I was told to keep my mouth shut and stop being dramatic, all of it was while Ryan was stealing my money to fund his affair. Sarah was crying now, but whether from anger, humiliation, or betrayal, I couldn't tell. "The wedding is over," she announced to the room, her voice shaking but clear. "Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry you had to witness this." The guests began filing out in uncomfortable silence, some stopping to offer awkward condolences to Sarah, others shooting angry looks in my direction. Within 30 minutes, the ballroom was nearly empty except for immediate family. Sarah's stepfather approached me with a grim expression. "Margaret, that was brutal," he said quietly. "Necessary maybe, but brutal." Yes, it was. Sarah's going to need time to process all of this. The betrayal, the public humiliation, the financial fraud. She's going to be angry at everyone for a while. I nodded, understanding that everyone included me. "Where's Ryan?" I asked. "Gone. He slipped out during the exodus without saying a word to anyone. Left Sarah sitting there in her wedding dress." Of course he had. Ryan was a coward who'd only been brave when he thought he had all the power. I looked across the room at Sarah, who was surrounded by her bridesmaids and a few close relatives. She looked lost and broken in her grandmother's wedding dress, clutching tissues as people tried to comfort her. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This isn't over. Ryan." I smiled and typed back, "Yes, it is." Then I forwarded Ryan's threatening text to Jennifer Walsh, my investigator. If Ryan wanted to continue playing games, he'd discover that I still had plenty of evidence I hadn't shared yet. The video shown at the wedding was just the beginning of what I'd collected over 8 months of investigation. As I gathered my things to leave, I wondered if Sarah would ever forgive me for choosing public vindication over private protection. I wondered if our relationship could survive the combination of her humiliation and my satisfaction at being proven right. But as I walked out of the country club, leaving behind the ruins of what should have been Sarah's perfect wedding day, I realized I didn't regret my choice. For 8 months, I'd been treated like a crazy old woman whose concerns didn't matter. I'd been publicly mocked, privately threatened, and systematically excluded from my daughter's life, all while funding the very affair I'd tried to warn her about. Sarah had chosen to believe Ryan's lies over her mother's love. She'd chosen his manipulation over my protection. And she'd made me pay for the privilege of being dismissed and humiliated. So yes, I'd chosen revenge over mercy. I'd chosen public vindication over private discretion. And watching Ryan's face as his carefully constructed lies crumbled in front of 180 witnesses had been worth every uncomfortable moment that would follow. Sometimes the truth needs an audience to be truly heard, and sometimes a mother's love looks like letting her daughter's choices play out publicly, so everyone can see who was really telling the truth all along. 3 days after the wedding disaster, Sarah finally called me. Her voice was flat, emotionless in a way that scared me more than screaming would have. "I need the financial records," she said without preamble. "Everything you have on Ryan's theft." "Of course. Do you want me to bring them over or email them? I don't want to see you right now." The line went quiet, except for her breathing. "Sarah, I know you're hurt." "Hurt?" Her laugh was bitter. "Mom, I just discovered that my husband married me to access your money while continuing an affair with his boss. Hurt doesn't begin to cover what I'm feeling. I tried to tell you." "Yes, you tried to tell me. And when I didn't listen, you decided to teach me a lesson in the most humiliating way possible." Her voice cracked slightly. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have 180 people watch you realize your entire relationship was a lie?" I closed my eyes, finally understanding the full weight of what I'd done. "I'm sorry about the public humiliation. But Sarah, if I'd shown you privately, we'll never know, will we? Because you didn't even try." Sarah took a shaky breath. "Just send me everything. Ryan's lawyer called this morning demanding a meeting. Apparently, he wants to work things out and avoid the scandal of an immediate annulment. You're not seriously considering—" "Of course not. But I need ammunition when I meet with my attorney this afternoon. Sarah paused. Mom, there's something else. I called the bank yesterday to check our joint accounts. Ryan cleaned them out Sunday morning. $47,000, gone. My blood ran cold. He stole your savings too? Everything we had together, plus money I'd been saving separately that he somehow accessed. Sarah's voice was getting shakier. The house we just bought? He put it in his name only, claiming it was for tax purposes. I have nothing, no money, no house, no job since I quit to plan the wedding. The calculated cruelty was breathtaking. Ryan hadn't just stolen my money. He'd systematically stripped Sarah of every financial resource before abandoning her. Sarah, you can stay here while you figure things out? No. The word was sharp. Final. I can't be around you right now. Every time I look at you, I remember that you let me make a fool of myself for months when you could have prevented it. Sweetheart, I was trying to protect you. You were trying to prove you were right. There's a difference. Sarah's voice was cold again. Just send the files. And Mom, don't call me. When I'm ready to talk, I'll call you. She hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in my empty kitchen. That evening, I spent 3 hours organizing every piece of evidence Jennifer Walsh had collected. Financial records, photographs, video files, documented timelines of Ryan's deception. It painted a picture of calculated fraud that went far beyond a simple affair. As I prepared the files for Sarah, I realized something that made my stomach drop. If Ryan had been this methodical about stealing from both Sarah and me, what were the chances this was his first time running such a comprehensive con? I called Jennifer Walsh immediately. Jennifer, I need you to dig deeper into Ryan's background. Before Sarah, before Victoria Reynolds. I want to know if this is a pattern. I can do that, but it'll take some time. What specifically are you looking for? Other victims, other relationships that ended with mysterious financial problems, other women who probably thought they were crazy for suspecting something was wrong. Margaret, that's a much larger investigation. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I thought about Sarah's voice, broken and defeated, telling me she had nothing left. I'm sure. If Ryan has done this before, his victims deserve to know they weren't crazy. And if he's planning to do it again, someone needs to stop him. 2 weeks later, Jennifer called with news that made everything click into place. Margaret, you need to sit down for this. Ryan Bennett isn't just a cheater and a thief. He's a professional con artist. Jennifer's investigation revealed that Ryan Bennett had been running variations of the same con for over 5 years, always targeting women with financial resources, always using the same playbook of isolation, manipulation, and systematic theft. His real name is Ryan Hoffman, Jennifer explained as we sat in my living room, documents spread across the coffee table. Bennett is an alias he's been using for the past 3 years. An alias? Complete with fake employment history, fabricated references, even a fraudulent college transcript. The marketing company he claimed to work for? He was never actually employed there. Victoria Reynolds was his inside connection who helped him maintain the illusion. I stared at the employment records, trying to process what this meant. So when Sarah met him, she met a completely fictional person. Ryan Hoffman has been creating fake identities to target wealthy women since he was 25. Sarah is victim number 4 that we've been able to identify. Jennifer pulled out photos of 3 other women, all attractive, all professional, all looking at the camera with the same trusting expression Sarah used to have. Lisa Chen, financial advisor in Seattle. Ryan was engaged to her for 8 months in 2019. Disappeared after draining her savings account of $60,000. Disappeared? Vanished completely. Left her planning their wedding while he moved to Portland and became Ryan Mitchell, unemployed actor looking for his big break. And the Portland victim? Amanda Foster, restaurant owner. He convinced her to invest $80,000 in his restaurant consulting business. Money disappeared, so did he. Amanda spent 2 years thinking she'd been a terrible judge of character. I looked at the third photo. A blonde woman with kind eyes who looked about Sarah's age. Monica Williams, Miami. This one's interesting because Ryan actually married her. Married her? For 6 months. Long enough to gain access to her inheritance from her grandmother. $200,000 gone. Monica came home from work one day to find divorce papers on the kitchen table, and Ryan nowhere to be found. The pattern was identical to what he'd done to Sarah. just on different scales depending on the victim's resources. How did you find all this? Once I had his real name and social security number, the rest fell into place. Ryan Hoffman has been reported to police in 4 different states, but he's careful never to cross federal lines in ways that would trigger FBI involvement. Jennifer handed me the most disturbing document yet. This is a notebook we found in his abandoned apartment. It's a detailed breakdown of Sarah's finances, your family dynamics, and what he called extraction timelines. I read Ryan's handwriting with growing horror. He'd cataloged every conversation, every family relationship, every potential source of money. Sarah wasn't just a victim. She was a carefully researched target. Subject's mother is primary financial resource, I read aloud. Emotional manipulation through daughter-mother conflict, most effective approach. Estimated extraction potential, $100,000 over 18 months before suspicion becomes unavoidable. There's more, Jennifer said gently. He was already planning his exit strategy before the wedding. The house purchase, the joint account access, the job resignation pressure. All of it was designed to leave Sarah completely dependent and financially devastated when he disappeared. But he didn't disappear? The wedding video exposure forced him to abandon his timeline? Exactly. Your revenge actually saved Sarah from a much worse fate. If Ryan had been able to execute his plan, she would have been left with nothing and no way to prove what happened. That evening, I called Sarah despite her request not to contact her. I know you don't want to talk to me, I said when she answered, but I have information you need to hear. Mom, I told you, Ryan Bennett isn't his real name. He's a professional con artist who's done this to at least 3 other women. The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. What do you mean, con artist? I told her everything Jennifer had discovered. The fake identity, the previous victims, the detailed notebook planning her financial destruction. As I spoke, I could hear Sarah's breathing change. He planned all of it, she whispered finally. From the very beginning, he planned to destroy my life. Yes, and if the wedding had gone according to his schedule, you would have been left with nothing and no way to prove what happened to your money. The other women, do they know? Jennifer's contacting them now. Apparently, Lisa Chen and Amanda Foster have been in therapy for years, thinking they were terrible judges of character who fell for obvious lies. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I need to see this evidence, she said finally. All of it. I'll bring it over. No, I'll come there. And Mom, I owe you an apology. A big one. Sarah arrived at my house the next evening looking like she hadn't slept in days. She was thinner, paler, and there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before the wedding. I've been thinking about everything you said, she began as we sat in my living room. About the con artist history, about the notebook, about how this was all planned from the beginning. She picked up one of Ryan's victim photos from the coffee table. I keep staring at these women and seeing myself. The same trusting expression, the same complete belief that we'd found true love. Sarah's voice was bitter. We all look so pathetically naive. You weren't naive, Sarah. You were targeted by a professional predator. Was I? Or did I just choose to ignore obvious red flags because I wanted the fantasy to be real? I thought carefully about how to respond. Sarah was clearly processing massive trauma and self-blame. What red flags do you think you ignored? Sarah laughed humorlessly. God, where do I start? The fact that he isolated me from all my friends? The way he always had explanations for everything that seemed suspicious? How he pushed me to quit my job and depend on him financially? Those aren't red flags most people would recognize. Sweetheart, they're sophisticated manipulation techniques that professional con artists spend years perfecting. But you saw through him immediately. I saw him with another woman by accident. If Janet hadn't mentioned seeing them together, I might never have known. Sarah picked up Ryan's notebook and flipped through pages of his handwritten analysis of our family dynamics. Listen to this, she said, reading aloud. Subject responds well to praise and validation, but becomes defensive when questioned. Mother-daughter relationship shows significant tension that can be exploited. Recommend positioning mother as controlling obstacle to relationship success. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. He turned me against you deliberately, Mom. Every fight we had, every time I chose him over you, he was pulling strings in the background, making it happen. I know. And I fell for it completely. I said horrible things to you, things I can't take back. I called you bitter and jealous and controlling, when really, you were the only person trying to protect me." The pain in her voice was devastating. "Sarah, you were being systematically manipulated by someone who studies human psychology for a living. None of this was your fault, wasn't it?" I chose to believe his version of every story. "When you showed me evidence, I dismissed it. When you tried to warn me, I attacked you for it." She set down the notebook and looked directly at me. "The worst part is that some part of me knew. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. But I was so invested in the relationship, so committed to proving everyone wrong about my judgment, that I talked myself out of trusting my instincts." "What do you mean?" "Little things that didn't make sense. Phone calls he took in private. Business trips that seemed suspicious. The way he always had cash but never wanted to discuss his actual income." Sarah shook her head. "I ignored every warning sign because admitting I was wrong felt worse than living with doubt." This was the conversation I'd been hoping for since the wedding disaster. Not just an acknowledgement that Ryan was a fraud, but Sarah recognizing how the manipulation had worked on her. "I'm sorry I chose public exposure," I said quietly. "If I'd found another way—" "There wasn't another way," Sarah interrupted. "You tried private conversation, remember? I called you paranoid and threatened to cut you off completely. Ryan had me so thoroughly programmed that nothing short of undeniable public proof would have worked." She stood up and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garden where she used to play as a child. "I've been angry at you for 3 weeks, she said without turning around. "Furious that you humiliated me in front of everyone. But reading Ryan's notebook, seeing how calculated everything was, I realized you saved my life." "Sarah, no, let me finish. If you hadn't exposed him at the wedding, he would have disappeared with everything I had. My savings, my house, my job, my self-respect. I would have been left with nothing and no way to prove what happened." She turned back to face me. "Instead, I have 180 witnesses to the truth. I have video evidence of his fraud. I have financial records showing exactly how he stole from both of us. Thanks to your revenge, I actually have a chance to recover from this." For the first time since the wedding, Sarah smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was genuine. Plus, watching his face when that video started playing was pretty satisfying. 2 months after the wedding disaster, Jennifer Walsh called with news that changed everything again. "Margaret, you need to get Sarah and meet me at my office immediately. We've discovered something about Ryan that makes his previous cons look like petty theft." Sarah and I drove to Jennifer's office in tense silence. Our relationship was still fragile, built on mutual trauma and shared rage rather than healed trust. Jennifer's office was packed with boxes of documents, computers displaying financial records, and a whiteboard covered in what looked like a complex crime timeline. "Ladies, Ryan Hoffman has been busier than we thought," Jennifer began without preamble. "We've now identified 7 victims across 5 states, and the total theft exceeds $1.2 million. Sarah gasped. $1.2 million? That's not even the worst part. Ryan wasn't working alone. Victoria Reynolds was his full partner, and they've been running this operation for 8 years. Jennifer pulled up photographs on her computer screen showing Ryan and Victoria with different hair colors, different clothing styles, even different names. They call themselves Ryan Mitchell and Sarah Johnson in Portland, David Bennett and Victoria Smith in Seattle, Michael Foster and Diana Williams in Phoenix. Always a different combination, always targeting affluent singles or couples. Couples? I asked. That's their specialty. They identify wealthy couples with relationship issues, then Ryan seduces the wife while Victoria becomes the husband's confidant. Both victims end up isolated from their support systems while the con artists drain their resources. Sarah was staring at the photos in disbelief. So while Ryan was manipulating me, Victoria was manipulating her husband David? Exactly. David Reynolds isn't an innocent victim. He's been Victoria's primary target for 2 years. She convinced him that Ryan was seducing her against her will, that she needed David's help to escape an abusive situation. David has given her over $300,000 to help her start over. The sophistication was breathtaking. While I'd been focused on Ryan's affair, I'd completely missed that Victoria was running an equally complex con on her own husband. But David filed for divorce, Sarah said. I thought he discovered the affair. He did. But Victoria convinced him that the affair was non-consensual, that Ryan was her boss and she was being coerced. David thinks he's rescuing his wife from a predator. Jennifer pulled up bank records showing massive transfers from David Reynolds' accounts to various offshore holdings. Victoria has been positioning herself as the victim of Ryan's manipulation while secretly coordinating every aspect of their operation. When they disappear, which was scheduled to happen right after your wedding, David will discover that his rescued wife has vanished with everything he owns. Jesus, Sarah breathed. How many people are they planning to destroy? Here's where it gets interesting. The FBI has been tracking this operation for 6 months, but they've been having trouble building a case because the victims were scattered across different jurisdictions and many were too embarrassed to come forward. Jennifer smiled grimly. But your wedding video changed everything. When that footage went public, it connected all the dots for federal investigators. They now have direct evidence of interstate fraud involving multiple victims and sophisticated identity theft. What does that mean for us? I asked. It means Ryan Hoffman and Victoria Reynolds were arrested this morning in Chicago, where they were apparently setting up their next operation. They're facing federal charges that carry sentences of 15 to 20 years each. Sarah sat down heavily, processing this information. So they're in jail? Federal holding, no bail. And here's the best part, because this is now a federal case, all of their assets are subject to seizure and recovery. The money they stole from you, from me, from all their victims. We're going to get it back. For the first time since the wedding, Sarah looked genuinely hopeful. All of it? Maybe not all, but significantly more than we expected. The FBI has already frozen accounts containing over $800,000 in stolen funds. I felt a weight lift from my chest that I hadn't even realized was there. What happens now? Now you both testify for the federal prosecutor, help put these predators in prison for a very long time, and start rebuilding your lives with the knowledge that justice was served. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. Margaret, your public exposure didn't just save Sarah from financial ruin. It exposed a criminal enterprise that was destroying families across the country. Sometimes revenge is just justice wearing a more honest face. 6 months after the wedding disaster, Sarah and I were sitting in federal court watching Ryan Hoffman and Victoria Reynolds receive their sentences. 22 years for Ryan, 18 for Victoria. The judge's words about sophisticated predatory behavior targeting vulnerable victims would echo in my mind for years. As we walked out of the courthouse, Sarah took my arm, the first physical contact we'd had since before her engagement. It's finally over, she said quietly. Are you okay? I'm getting there. Therapy helps. The financial recovery helps more. She managed a small smile. Getting back $97,000 tends to improve one's outlook on life. We sat on a bench outside the courthouse, watching normal people go about their normal lives, unburdened by the knowledge of how easily those lives could be destroyed by someone with the right combination of charm and calculation. I need to tell you something, Sarah said, not looking at me. I've been angry at you for 6 months, not because you exposed Ryan, but because you were right about everything, and I was wrong about everything. Sarah, let me finish. I was angry because your dramatic revelation made me confront how completely I'd been fooled. It was easier to blame you for humiliating me than to admit that I'd ignored every warning sign and chosen a predator over my own mother. She turned to face me directly. But sitting in that courtroom, listening to 7 other women describe exactly the same manipulation techniques Ryan used on me, I finally understood something. You didn't just save me from financial ruin. You saved me from years of self-blame and gaslighting. What do you mean? If Ryan had disappeared according to his original plan, I would have spent years thinking I was a terrible judge of character who fell for obvious lies. I would have blamed myself for every red flag I missed, every warning I ignored. Sarah pointed toward the courthouse. But because you exposed him publicly, I knew immediately that I was the victim of a professional criminal, not a fool who couldn't see through basic deception. That made all the difference in my recovery. I thought about the other victims we'd met during the investigation, women who had spent years in therapy, convinced they were fundamentally flawed in their ability to judge people. I'm sorry it had to happen so publicly, I said. I'm not anymore. Sarah's voice was stronger than it had been in months. Public exposure meant public vindication. everyone who witnessed Ryan's manipulation also witnessed the truth about who he really was. I never had to convince anyone or justify my reaction because they all saw the evidence simultaneously. We sat quietly for a moment, processing the end of a chapter that had dominated our lives for over a year. "There's something else," Sarah said. "I'm moving back home. The apartment I've been renting is too expensive, and honestly, I miss having family around. You're always welcome, you know that." "I know, but I need you to understand that our relationship is going to be different now. I love you, and I'm grateful for what you did, but I don't trust my own judgment enough yet to just go back to how things were." I nodded, understanding that rebuilding trust would take time for both of us. "I'm seeing someone," Sarah added casually. "Oh?" "His name is Michael. He's a teacher I met in therapy group. He was also the victim of a romance scam, though not as sophisticated as Ryan's operation." "How do you know he's legitimate?" Sarah laughed, the first genuinely happy sound I'd heard from her in months. "Because I hired Jennifer Walsh to run a background check on him before our second date. Turns out he really is just a divorced high school history teacher with 2 kids and no hidden agenda. Smart. I learned from the best, both in terms of how to investigate someone and how to trust my instincts when something feels wrong." As we walked to our cars, Sarah stopped and hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing through Ryan when I couldn't, for gathering evidence when I wouldn't listen, for choosing truth over my comfort, and for loving me enough to risk our relationship to save my life. I'd do it again," I said honestly. "I know, and now I understand that's what real love looks like sometimes. It's not always comfortable or easy or kind. Sometimes it's choosing to do what's necessary rather than what's wanted." 6 months later, Sarah called to tell me she was engaged to Michael. This time, she asked me to help plan the wedding. This time, I met her fiancé multiple times before the proposal. This time, we both paid attention to red flags and trusted our instincts. And this time, when Sarah walked down the aisle, I knew she was marrying someone who truly loved her rather than someone who saw her as a convenient target. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the truth, even when it destroys everything they thought they wanted. Sometimes being a mother means saving your child from their own trusting heart. And sometimes, love looks like public humiliation, followed by private vindication. The video that destroyed Sarah's first wedding had also revealed something equally important. My daughter was strong enough to survive betrayal, smart enough to learn from manipulation, and resilient enough to rebuild her life on a foundation of truth rather than lies. That was worth every uncomfortable moment of the most dramatic wedding reception in the history of the Riverside Country Club. And judging by the 22-year prison sentence Ryan received, it was also worth the risk of temporary damage to our relationship. Sometimes revenge is just love refusing to be polite about it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.